And it's Shiny, and I'm back with another movie review. So I watched the movie Green Book twice, yesterday, and then I watched it again this morning. Um, it's an autobiography about the pianist Don Shirley, um, who had a nice run in the late '50s, early 1960s. Um, the movie was written. It was based off the book written by Tony V, which was the driver. I can't really pronounce his last name, and I'm not going to try. But the book was written by him. And they adapted that book into a movie. But it's his experience, being hired as his driver, and going on his music tour with him, and his experiences with Don Shirley. So I want to get start off with Don Shirley. So he had this band, well, not a band, they considered themselves a trio. It was Don Shirley and the Don Shirley Trio, where he had a cello guy, a guitarist, and then he was the pianist. Um, Don Shirley, he was signed to a record label. He's a rich man, rich black man. He lives in this like real nice house above, like he lives above a music stadium. So he has this real nice home above a music stadium. So that just shows, how much money he was, the type of upper echelon class he was a part of, even being the black man in the 1960s. Um, he was a classy dude, upper echelon, like I said. He was very cultured, a great pianist. He enjoyed drinking. He was passionate. And he was also very quiet and well reserved and stern. Like he was like a real stern man. Like he reminded me of my grandpa. They didn't really say much. And when they did, it was always like a sarcastic joke. So, I kind of, identified a lot with the Don Shirley character because and attitude wise, reminded me a little bit of my grandfather with, just the sternness of it all. And then, when he finally did, get to show a little bit of his personality, you could tell he's a bit of a jokester, but in a very sarcastic way. And then you had Tony V. Oh wait, and then Don Shirley, he was also married, but he had got a divorce and he didn't have any children. And then you had Tony V. He was married with kids, Italian dude, married with kids. He's a rude, tough guy, family man. He's a great provider, good heart. He just like it was nice to see the balance between both relationships. You had the white Italian guy from the lower end of society, and you had this upper echelon black dude from the upper part of society. So it was interesting to see them two kind of play off of each other. Him coming from an astute background, and then the Tony guy coming from a more of I guess you could say a city background per se. So so Don Cornelius, he had his parents. I did some more information on him. Found out his parents were immigrants, Jamaican immigrants. Um, he did not feel accepted by his own people, nor of course he didn't feel accepted by white people, but he didn't feel accepted by his people either, because he felt like because he was a rich black musician who played the piano, that he wasn't, and because of the way he acted, that he wasn't accepted by his own people, like they didn't consider him black. um so now let's talk about the movie. So I really enjoyed the movie. Like the cinematography was great, the acting was great, the actors did a great job with the portrayal. um It went a lot in. So he was on his. So Don Shirley, he needed a security guard and a driver to drive him to his concerts down south. Because it was a real racist time. 1960s. A lot of still racism still heavy presence in the south. So he needed somebody to be a driver. He was also looking for some sort of like security. So he ended up hiring Tony. And at first they didn't really get along, and they started to get to know each other a little better. You know, a funny part to me is that it was the black upper echelon Don Shirley who did not know how to eat fried chicken, and you have a white Italian guy showing this black guy how to eat fried chicken. I thought that was hilarious. Um, so we get to see a lot of his experiences, the way he went through, but not being served. He would be able to perform at these clubs and restaurants, but he would not be able to eat at them. They would give him the most unwelcoming, dressing room conditions. They would just talk to him any kind of way, but he was a very astute man. He was very respectful. He spoke, very well. He was very articulate. He was very, educated, as you can tell, and he just, he had a great confidence to himself. So I did like that about him, regardless of what they did or said to him, he always kept his dignity, So I did like that. Both the characters learned, something from one another. Like Tony learned, how to write better. He learned, how to speak, speak well. Don Shirley learned from, Tony that, family is important and that he should get in contact with his family, because Don Shirley, he got divorced from his wife and he didn't really have a family, so he lived alone. And he said he had a brother, but they had, lost contact or whatever. So, but Tony, no, like I remember when I first started watching the movie, I had noticed that he felt, I felt like he was just a little lonely, when he looked depressed, like he would, just be sitting in the back while he's being drove real quiet in the stern. And then when they would show him in his hotel and stuff, he would just be sitting alone. He always wanted to have a drink. So, he definitely was suffering from depression. And then, while he was on the road, he had obviously he was suffering with bisexuality because he had got caught with his another with a gay white man, and they got arrested. And Tony had to come and figure a way to get him out. He eventually did get him out, but it showed there that he was definitely suffering with um, sexual orientation, or maybe not even suffering, just the fact that he was bisexual in the 1960s as well as a gay man. It was like, just imagine psychology going through being black, bisexual, and underappreciated musician. Like, that's a lot to go through psychologically, and the fact that he was alone. He didn't have a family. He didn't have somebody to talk to. And when you see from Tony's family, him and his wife were loving. They had kids. They had a big family. So it was great to see that family dynamic. Something that something that Shirley didn't have. Now the racism in the movie was just like any other racism. You've seen in a lot of racist movies. How they treat black people. So that was kind of. Eh. I did you like the fact that they, Don Shirley talked about how, he's a great pianist, but, they didn't want him to become a pianist because they felt like, white people wouldn't accept black people playing their music. So, they made him just another color entertainer. And that's the same thing they did in Nina Simone. Nina Simone was a gifted pianist at the age of 5. But because she was black, they did not let her into Juilliard, and they also would not give her the title of, classical pianist until she was deceased. So, that racism, in music is still, it holds a heavy presence over a lot of black artists. This is why a lot of black artists ended up doing what they call secular music, because that was the only music they were allowed to do at the time. But a lot of these musicians were well played. They were, they could, do some things with those keys. So I'm glad that Don Shirley talked about how the record, they basically made him, even though he was getting paid well, he was making a lot of money, but he wasn't doing the type of music that he really wanted to do. But then there was a scene where they had went to, an urban city where, where it was, some of his people, his people in the bar, and he played music with some of the guys, and he enjoyed it. And he was able to see that, he would be welcome. All he had to do was show them, all they had to do was show each other who they were. Like, music is what, connected them on that stage, and I felt that was a great moment for him, for somebody who felt isolated by his own community because of his riches and, his status. He was seeing that, music can connect people regardless of class or whatever. Overall, the movie, it was a great movie. I did want to talk about the family's reaction. Now, they condemned the movie. They said that they were not contacted by the studio representatives, so nobody contacted the family until after post production. And like I said, this movie was written by Tony, so it's not like it was written by Don Shirley. Don Shirley's brother claims that Shirley didn't see Tony as a friend and that he was just an employee. So he's basically saying that the relationship that was shown in the movie, wasn't real. It was really just employer employee. But even if it wasn't real, I did enjoy the the chemistry and the relationship that the movie showed that they were building, because again, like I said, they started off as opposites, but then they started to get to know one each other and learn from one another, and actually started to see each other as real friends. And I thought that that was good. But the brother is claiming that that's not true. But like I said, in the movie, Don said that he didn't talk to his brother. So it's like, it's really weird. So it's like they made sure to say in the movie that he wasn't connected with his brother. And they didn't give a reason. They just said because he was always on the road. And then the brother has come out and said that, that's not true. So, it's interesting. And, Shirley is dead. So, it's not like we can get him to talk. Um, his brother wanted it. He said they should have focused more on the fact that a successful, well-to-do black artist was hiring domestics who do not look like him, which was true. He had an Italian driver, he had an Indian housekeeper, so like he was a well-to-do black man with all these other, minorities, he hired to, work under him or whatever. Um, the actor who played Don Shirley, Marshala Ali, who did a great job, by the way, he apologized to the family and Shirley's nephew. He said, "I did the best I could with the material I had and was not aware that the relatives with whom I could have consulted. I'm sorry, I misstated over. He said, I did the best I could with the material I had and was not aware that there were relatives with whom I could have consulted to add some nuance to the character." So he's basically saying he didn't know that, there were still people alive that was in his family. But this is why I don't like unauthorized biographies and stuff like that, because, again, this wasn't written by Don Shirley. This is written from the point of view of his driver, his employee. Now, his employee, his nephew, the employee's nephew said that, Don Shirley did approve of everything that went inside the book, so that, it's not a farce and they weren't just making stuff up. But um, and then Tony V's his nephew claims that Don Shirley you know told them not to speak to anyone in his family, and that he approved of everything that went in the film. So it's like I don't know because Don Shirley died and there's no official statement. So I don't know if Don Shirley actually told them. I don't know why a person who, if they're gonna do a biography on you, why would you tell them to not contact your family? Wouldn't those be the people who know you the best? Wouldn't those be some of the people who can give insight to your childhood and to your upbringing? But then I did some research and I found out that a lot about his upbringing they were fabricating for the time. For reasons, his record label were doing certain things for certain reasons, but that doesn't negate or take away from the fact that he was a great pianist. But stuff about his background is a little sketchy. And then the fact that, his brother has come out, his family has come out against the movie saying that, they didn't approve or appreciate, a lot of things in the movie. And then we can also lastly talk about, the whole white savior complex where, you have this well-to-do rich black person, who can afford, protection, who can afford these things, but there's, people who are seeing it as, oh, he had to go and hire this white Italian guy to protect him, to make sure he was all right, to fight his battles because he wasn't bold or brave enough to do it. And I feel like I understand that wholeheartedly. I understand where people are coming from with that point of view because every time they do a movie about black people, especially in like a Jim Crow racist era time, they make sure to, always include some sort of a white savior who comes and saves the day, which does kind of irritate, us as black viewers because it's like, really. But I mean, I didn't see it in that way. Like I said, I seen it as, Tony, you know, Tony had his prejudices, but he wasn't, like as far out there as his family. So I feel like once he got to know Don Shirley and once he heard his music and, once he got to know him as a person, he really, genuinely, liked him as a person, regardless of, who he was. And then they even show how, Tony V, he knew artists like Aretha Franklin, he knew like people like Little Richard, and, Don Shirley didn't feel like those were his people. He didn't really listen to that kind of music. So, because he felt like, he was more of a classical artist. So, again, he learned a lot from Tony V. Tony V learned a lot from Don Shirley. It's like I understand what people are saying with that argument, but I just feel like, overall, it doesn't negate from the fact that, we got to learn about another classical, pianist. Because, all I knew who a black classical pianist was Nina Simone. So now we have, Don Shirley. So, I'm, glad that they did do the, biography on them. So if you didn't check out Green Book, sorry, this review was a little long. If you didn't check out Green Book, make sure you definitely watch it. I recommend it. Was a great movie. Um, Give it a chance.